Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Atari A to Z Flashback, a series of explorations of the 150 games that make up Atari Flashback Classics for Nintendo Switch. Today's game is Combat 2, which was originally announced in 1982 and scheduled for release in 1984. However, it was a victim of the 1983 video game crash and never officially released, which is a bit of a shame. 250 prototype cartridges were produced and they were sold at the Classic Gaming Expo in 2001. This was sort of the first time a lot of people saw Combat 2 out in the wild. And then in 2005, with the release of the Atari Flashback 2 console, the game got a much wider release because it was included as part of the lineup of games on there. And since then it's been included in most sort of Atari Flashback Classics compilations and Atari Vault and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's pretty easy to come by these days. Combat 2 actually strips down the variety of different games that you had in the original Combat, so it's just tanks now, there's no biplanes or jet fighters. But it does add a bit of depth to the gameplay. So tanks now take multiple hits to destroy, you have a super weapon that you can unleash by firing while you're in your base, you've got destructible scenery, and you've got customizable battlefields as well. So if you ever wanted to draw a knob or write the word anus across the battlefield, now you can do that. So, let's go play Combat 2. Okay, here we are once again with Atari Flashback Classics. This time we're taking a look at Combat 2. Now once again, because this was a two-player only game, I've recorded the footage beforehand with my wife, who has graciously agreed to help, and I'm commentating on it after the fact. So you'll have to live without my beautiful face this time around, but I'm sure you'll survive. So, Combat 2, as we've already said, was an unreleased prototype, which means that it's perhaps not quite as fleshed out as the original Combat was. But what it basically does is it takes the tank battle feature of the original Combat and fleshes it out quite a bit. So the mode you're seeing at the moment is the basic mode, where there's two players on either side of a river, and you have to destroy each other to reduce each other's stock of tanks. And the trees, which are the green blocks, those conceal your position, and they block shots, but they don't block movement. So you see that you can pass underneath them like that. Now, one interesting twist on this over and above the original Combat is that each tank takes multiple hits to destroy this time around. And so that's one way that it alleviates the problem the original had, where you could just get into a cycle of destroying one person over and over again and getting lots and lots of points. And it also changes the focus of the game somewhat, because you actually have regenerating health in this as well. So if you get hit and then you can avoid taking damage for a little while, you can actually repair yourself. Yeah, it means you can play a lot more tactically. Although, as you'll see in our games here, a lot of the time things seem to sort of degenerate into putting your two tanks right up against each other, inserting your barrels into one another, and seeing who can fire off your shots the fastest. Now, if you look at my tank up in the upper left, I'm doing a special technique that you can do in this game, which is a homing missile launched from your base. Now, the way that works is if you look down on the status panel at the bottom, you'll see that as well as the tank indicators, so the top tank indicators how many tanks you've got left, then the tank indicator at the bottom is how much damage your tank has taken, which is also indicated by the colour of your tank on the main screen. And then there's a missile icon as well that gradually moves up from the bottom. And when that missile icon is showing the whole missile as it is now, if you move into your base and press the fire button, you will launch a homing missile from your base that is guaranteed to hit your target. So that cannot be avoided, but it also won't destroy your target outright. It'll just do the usual 1 point of damage to them. So you need to follow that up with a couple of shots from yourself. Hopefully like I'll do here. There we go. So she's taken 1 point of damage, and 2 and 3, and she's down, and that's the end of that game. Okay, so the second game mode that we have here has brick walls. So, as the name suggests, The brick walls cannot be passed through. So in the modes where the walls are randomly generated, like this one, they're left in an arrangement that isn't too labyrinthine. But you can also destroy them with your shots as well. So if they're really in the way, you can just blast them out the way. But this makes for quite an interesting game of cat and mouse, as you'll see, because you can sort of hide a lot better with these than you can with the trees. But again, it often degenerates into that same sit up against each other and see who can press the fire button the quickest. There's a couple of other interesting little twists in this game. Oh, avoided that deadly final shot. Not bad. Can't quite get the right angle though, and we're both fully repaired. Oh. See, once again, my wife, having claimed that she's not very good at games where you have to sort of turn and move and aim and that sort of thing, proven herself to be quite good at combat. See, this is a good use of the homing missile. So you attack your opponent from one side with it, and then finish them off from another angle. That's a pretty good way of doing things. I believe you can also win by completely penetrating your opponent's base and destroying that dot in the middle. But obviously that's very difficult to do, given that new tanks respawn directly in... don't know what happened with the graphics there. Yeah, new tanks spawn directly inside the base. So there you go. But yeah, so like I was starting to say before, some interesting mechanics in this. Particularly with regard to terrain, which was not a factor in the original combat, aside from the walls of mazes and that sort of thing. So in this one, you can drive through the river, but it slows you right down to a crawl. And also taking damage slows you right down to a crawl as well, as you saw there. But you can also cross those bridges on the river. And it actually quite cleverly distinguishes between whether you entered the river area on a bridge or on the water. So it's intelligent enough to realise that if you enter the river from the water and then pass into the bridge area, you're effectively going underneath the bridge rather than magically being able to get your tank up onto it. Which is quite a nice, clever little touch. Now, I'm not sure of the dates. I'd have to check what came out when, but I have a feeling that a fair bit of the stuff that was developed for Combat 2 ended up in the game called Countermeasure for Atari 5200, which we'll see in probably a couple of weeks, I think. Right, what we're on now, this is a custom mode where both players are able to draw their own layout of trees. So, using your joystick and the fire button, you can be as childish as you want and write whatever you please using the medium of trees. And as you can see, both my wife and I are not what you'd call super mature. So there we are. Anus versus bum. With 3 exclamation marks from me. Is my wife going to add one as well? I think she might. Yep, there we go. Oh no. Bumf. What did she write? I can't remember. Was it bumface? It was probably bumface. I get called bumface quite a lot. Yep, there we go. Got enough space for an E there? Just about. Oh no, not quite. Bumfussy. Right, so once you've arranged your trees to your liking, you then hit the game reset button, and then you can play on your custom battlefield. And the trees work in exactly the same way as before, so you can pass underneath them. They block vision of you and they block your shots, but they don't block your movement.
And so, should you see fit, you can also have your own little metagame in this mode if you want to as well. In that you could draw out a nice design using your trees and challenge your opponent to completely obliterate that design as quickly as possible. Or something. Plus, there is, of course, the inherent comedy value of any game that allows you to draw things on the screen. And they knew. They surely knew. They surely knew what this feature would be used for. That it would not be used for good. It would only be used for evil. Close range homing missile from me. My wife failing to get away from the most rudimentary of point-blank shots there. And there she is waiting for her own homing missile to charge up. Meanwhile, I zip in with complete confidence that is ultimately to my cost. My wife is down to her last tank though. As she launches another homing missile, I attempt to blast my way into her base and destroy her in her own home base. But she takes me out first, but I still win. So that's good. Alright, and then, as you might expect, as well as being able to place your own trees, you can also place your own brick walls. Now, the pixels you use for the brick walls are a little bit larger, so you can't sort of fit quite as much in, I don't think. But you can still be suitably immature about things, as you can probably tell. No prizes for guessing what we're both doing here. And my wife is also discovering that you don't seem to be able to actually delete a pixel once you've placed it as well. So if you make a mistake, you're just stuck with that. So if it really bothers you all that much, once the game starts, just go and destroy it yourself. And so, of course, there had to be a knob drawn at some point. And I'm pleased to confirm that yes, it was me. I was the one who drew the knob. Then once again, you hit the reset button to actually start the game. And off you go. And this is where I discovered that the 2 pixels of walls for my knob actually didn't offer all that much protection. Because it took only a moment for my wife to blast her way through and utterly destroy me. Whereas if you look down her intricate lettering, that takes up a lot more space. So if she hid behind that, which she's not doing at the moment, I'd have a lot more work to do. Meanwhile, here I was, trying to see if I could achieve victory by destroying the inside of her base. Couldn't get that working for some reason, but I think that's something you can do. Maybe you just have to blast your way inside and then park your tank in it or something like that. I'm not sure. Either way. Oh yes, another thing you'll notice is you actually have a reverse gear in this one as well. You move much more slowly going backwards in this one, but you can move backwards, which I don't believe is something you could do in the original combat. But in itself, that adds its own sort of interesting tactical options. It allows you to allows you a good means of sort of getting out of your opponent's arc of fire and so on. And it's all over. And so that's pretty much everything that Combat 2 has to offer. So I guess it just remains for me to say, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. New episodes of Atari A to Z are on Tuesdays and Atari ST A to Z on Thursdays. Check out atariatoz.wordpress.com for a full archive. Do please also check out my other projects moegamer.net, where I explore Japanese and Japanese-inspired games from yesterday and today, and videopackgames.wordpress.com, which aims to catalogue the small but well-formed library of the Philips G7000 Videopack computer, also known as the Magnavox Odyssey 2. You can also support my work on Patreon or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.